This is NTD Evening News. Live from our NTD Global Headquarters in New York City, here is Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. A major heat wave hitting the Midwest and Northeast, and it's expected to last all week. Temperatures could reach record-breaking numbers in major metropolitan areas like New York City. NTD's Fiona G has more.
If you're going to be anywhere in the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic, or the Northeast of the U.S. this week, it would be best to stay indoors and crank up that AC.
In New York City, the heat index is expected to top 99 degrees Fahrenheit. There won't be cool breezes or nightly temperature drops to give relief from the heat. The elderly and those with pre-existing medical conditions are most vulnerable to heat-related illness. The city will be opening cooling centers, some of which are even pet-friendly. Mayor Eric Adams gave New Yorkers advice on other ways to stay cool.
And if you must go outside, take breaks, utilize whatever area that you could have for shades, wear a hat, do whatever is possible to keep your body temperature down. And we all urge New Yorkers to plan ahead.
New Yorkers and tourists alike shared what they'll be doing to stave off the heat.
Drink waters, cold showers, and fans on. It feels like weather's more extreme than ever this year, so I don't even know. I feel like just mentally I have to prep myself.
Exactly. Always some water, but with some flavor also. And maybe we want to go to some swimming pools if we have the opportunity.
I'm going to walk and get exercise every day. The heat doesn't bother me. Hydrate, everybody. Drink water.
Elsewhere, Vermont is predicting the hottest three-day stretch in 30 years. Pittsburgh is expected to reach 97 degrees, breaking the 95-degree record from 1933. Washington, D.C. will also near the 100-degree mark. The heat wave will affect more than half of all Americans and extend all the way into southern Canada.
With temperatures soaring to record-breaking highs, remember to drink water, wear sunscreen, check in on your neighbors, and stay safe. Fiona G., NTD News.
A wildfire burning about 67 miles northwest of Los Angeles has already burned close to 15,000 acres, forcing the evacuation of more than 1,000 people. Firefighters have been battling strong winds and complicated terrain as they try to beat back the flames in Southern California's post-fire. NTD's Bill Thomas tells us more.
The post-fire was first reported on Saturday afternoon at 1:45 near Gorman School Road and Ralph's Ranch Road in Gorman, California. With winds reported up to 60 miles per hour, coupled with dry vegetation and warm temperatures, the conditions were ripe for a wildfire. The blaze quickly spread to the mountainous terrain right next to Interstate 5, and now on the third day of the firefight, the blaze is just 8% contained. We spoke with Craig Little, a public information officer with the LA County Fire Department, to see if the flames would be beaten back anytime soon.
No, I don't think so. The winds are very heavy, which promotes the growth of the fire and makes it very difficult for us to fight the fire.
We asked if anyone had been hurt as a result of the fire.
We had 3 minor injuries this morning. They were transported to a local area hospital. Very minor injuries, 2 adults and 1 child.
Regarding wildfires, property damage is always a concern, but Captain Sheila Kelleher with the LA County Fire Department shares with us some positive news.
But no homes have been damaged in this fire yet. We did have some evacuations, but they were just closures of day parks. So we had a bunch of people enjoying the park with their ATVs and things like that, so they had to leave. So technically they're evacuated out of the area, but no homes have been evacuated yet.
However, Captain Kelleher says residents could face evacuation orders if the weather changes.
And if that wind does shift and starts pushing it more towards the city, because right now it's pushing it out kind of towards the wilderness.
Kelleher says there have been a number of recent fires, but this one really exploded.
We've had a lot of fires in the last 4 weeks start out there, and the crews have done an amazing job shutting them down quick. That's why they haven't heard about them, but that alone says how dry that fuel is. We have 2.5 years of unburned fuel in a lot of places because we haven't had a big major fire over the last couple of seasons. We've had them just bumping off, but not to this size. So there's a lot of unburnt fuel out there and a lot of growth, and with the wind and the low humidity, they've dried out already.
To increase the level of containment as rapidly as possible, firefighters from a number of agencies are all pitching in.
We have a coordinated effort of many different fire service fire departments that are helping in this effort. Los Angeles County, Ventura County, Kern County, Angeles National Forest, and a host of other stations that are helping us to fight this fire. Well over 350 firefighting personnel helping with this, along with fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters.
Firefighters on the ground and in the air are doing all they can to increase their level of containment, but progress is hampered by winds, complicated topography, and an enormous amount of dry brush. Bill Thomas and Jimmy Ma, NTD News, Gorman, California.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dissolved his 6-member war cabinet. The move was widely expected after the departure from government of former General Benny Gantz. Gantz's absence from the government makes Netanyahu more dependent on nationalist allies to govern. The Israeli Prime Minister is now expected to hold consultations about the Gaza war with a small group of ministers. The war cabinet was formed in the early days of the war. Gantz, then an opposition party leader, joined the coalition in a show of unity following the October 7th Hamas terror attack on southern Israel. Meanwhile, the Israeli military said today the United Nations had yet to take advantage of the new protected road the army had established in the south of the enclave. NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg met with President Biden at the White House today, the head of the military alliance announcing that more than 20 member countries will meet their defense spending targets this year. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more from the White House.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg met with President Joe Biden at the Oval Office this Monday ahead of next month's NATO annual summit in Washington, D.C. The military alliance will unveil next month an agreement to speed up access and delivery of military assistance to Ukraine.
It is now time to step back and figure out how NATO can provide better coordination of those efforts, not just the security assistance that's flowing into Ukraine, but also the training. Many countries are training Ukrainian troops. We want to make sure that those efforts are properly coordinated and brought together under one roof.
The details of this new agreement among NATO members were discussed during last week's Defense Ministers Summit in Brussels. According to Jens Stoltenberg, around 700 NATO service members will be posted in a military base in Germany to provide additional security assistance to Ukraine.
Support Ukraine through the planning and coordination of donations, manage transfer and repair of equipment, provide support to the long-term development of Ukraine's armed forces. These efforts do not make NATO a party to the conflict.
During Monday's meeting, Secretary General of NATO Jens Stoltenberg touted that 20 out of the 32 member nations will reach their commitment to spend more than 2% of their GDP on defense spending. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Before meeting with President Biden today, the NATO chief reportedly said he is considering deploying more nuclear weapons. Russia is already responding with criticism. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has more on the rising tensions.
NATO reportedly plans to take nuclear weapons out of storage and place them on standby. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg told the Telegraph that this comes in the face of a growing threat from Russia and China. The Kremlin responded on Monday.
This is nothing but another escalation of tension.
Moscow accuses Western allies of pushing the world to the brink of nuclear confrontation. That's by giving Ukraine weapons worth billions of dollars. The Kremlin on Monday also commented on a Ukraine peace summit which took place in Switzerland over the weekend.
If we talk about the effectiveness of this meeting, then of course it approaches zero.
The Kremlin repeatedly criticized the fact that Russia wasn't invited to the summit, saying peace can't be achieved without them. The president of Switzerland agreed on Sunday.
A lasting solution must involve both parties.
Most of the 90 countries attending the summit signed a declaration at the end of the meeting. They condemned the invasion and rejected Russian demands for parts of Ukraine as conditions for peace. Vice President Kamala Harris announced more than $1.5 billion in aid for Ukraine's energy sector.
As we look forward to that peace and work toward that, the United States is committed to helping Ukraine rebuild.
And National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said this regarding peace talks.
Can there be a consensus reached?
I think there's going to be a strong outcome.
And lastly, Russian Navy vessels left Cuba on Monday. This includes a nuclear-powered submarine. They arrived in Cuba last week. It was widely seen as a Russian show of force amid high tensions between the US and the Kremlin. Ariane Pastar, NTD News.
Terrorist threats. Former acting CIA Director Michael McCall is warning of a potential terrorist attack in the months ahead. Here's White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby reacting.
It's not something that we take lightly. It's not something that we aren't constantly trying to improve and sharpen. And we have not lost one bit of focus on the terrorism threat, either here in the United States or around the world.
The article cites similar warnings from top U.S. officials, including FBI Director Christopher Wray, testifying before the Senate Intel Committee. Wray previously said foreign terrorist threats have reached new heights after the Hamas October 7th attack in Israel. He has also brought up the situation at the U.S. southern border, where thousands of illegal immigrants are entering unchecked every week, including those on the terror watch list. Morrell is urging Washington to launch a comprehensive campaign to stop any terrorist planning that may be underway. Should social media apps have a warning label? That's what Surgeon General Vivek Murthy is calling for amid what he calls a mental health emergency among young people. NTD's Jason Blair reports.
Surgeon General Murthy wants Congress to take action and put a warning label on social media platforms, much like those found on cigarettes. In an opinion article he wrote Monday in the New York Times, he said, quote, "A Surgeon General's warning label, which requires congressional action, would regularly remind parents and adolescents that social media has not been proved safe." End quote. Evidence from tobacco studies show that a warning label can increase awareness and change behavior. He said on X that social media has become an important contributor to the mental health crisis among young people. In the article, he said that adolescents who spend more than 3 hours a day on social media double their risk of anxiety and depression. And quote, "The average daily use in this age group as of the summer of 2023 was 4.8 hours. Murthy also said that parents and schools can participate by implementing phone-free times, and suggested that parents wait until after middle school before allowing their kids on social media. Jason Blair, NTD News.
In Maryland, Governor Wes Moore is pardoning over 175,000 marijuana convictions. This makes Maryland the first state to issue mass pardons on such convictions.
So first, I will grant pardons to Marylanders who have been convicted for misdemeanor possession of cannabis. And second, I will grant full pardons to Marylanders who have been convicted of certain misdemeanor possession crimes of drug paraphernalia. So we aren't nibbling around the edges. We are taking actions that are intentional, that are sweeping, and unapologetic. And this is the largest such action in our nation's history.
The governor said the move is aimed at addressing the disproportionate impact the state's drug policies have had on people of color. The pardons will forgive low-level marijuana possession charges for an estimated 100,000 people. The pardons will not result in anyone being released from jail. Maryland legalized recreational cannabis in 2023 following a ballot measure. The state has since decriminalized possession of personal use amounts of cannabis. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Earlier, we spoke with retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gobb, who is an international military strategist. From Russia to North Korea, Vietnam, and Israel, we discussed the latest developments in foreign affairs. Darren Gobb, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Hey, Tiffany. Always a pleasure to see you.
Now, Russia's President Vladimir Putin is set to visit North Korea this week. This will be his first trip there in over 2 decades. Now, what does this deepening relationship between Russia and North Korea mean for the West?
Well, for the West, what it ultimately means is, one, that Putin was comfortable enough with what was going on in Ukraine to be able to take a trip to North Korea in the first place, a nation that we've seen already has greater ties with Russia from a defense perspective and technological development perspective. But when you wrap in North Korea with Russia, and now also think about this from the perspective of China and Iran, and this new axis of evil that's developing, all you really see are deepening ties between countries whose common enemy tends to be us, the democratic West, and specifically Israel too. So I'd be concerned about this, and it'll be interesting to see if we ever see the agreement, but I don't know that I'd ever believe that we're seeing all of it anyways if they shared it with us.
On that note, after this trip, Putin is also stopping in Vietnam's capital of Hanoi. How should we read this?
Well, these are deeper ties of communism, and let's just be honest that Russia hasn't fully moved beyond communism, even from the Soviet Union. It is just growing smaller as an individual nation rather than being a union of Soviet socialists. So this is a continuing expansion of his influence among like-minded nations. This is a unique opportunity for him to expand that influence into areas where America is also continuing to try to keep its hold on nations like Philippines. And when I say hold, meaning continuous good relationships with them in defense treaties and pacts, Philippines and Japan and such. So China and Russia have been working together for a while. This is just another country where they're trying to reach into in Southeast Asia, among many countries down there that they're trying to work with.
Now, both Russia and Hamas have been laying out their demands for a ceasefire in regards to both wars. Now, the West has resoundingly rejected Russia's move, but Hamas seems to be gaining some steam here. Should they be the ones getting to decide how conflicts get resolved?
Well, Hamas specifically at this point has no vote at the table, and they shouldn't. They're the only end state that's worthy of pursuit with Hamas is to eradicate them. And I don't see any reason why that should change, and I don't see Israel changing that goal either. I'd be surprised if ultimately they did. Russia, well, they're just trying to, again, seek to expand their influence, and this is not something that they need to get involved in, but they will, of course, because, again, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So if Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea all work together against the West, they may not always get along themselves. But as long as they're focused on Israel, the West, and Western democracies, they're content to cooperate towards that end. And this is just another example of that.
In terms of Hamas, what do you make of the growing international condemnation against Israel?
I think they're losing focus on who started this whole thing. And if you want to hold somebody account, it needs to reside solely on the doorstep of Hamas and nobody else. You can debate how Israel does it with its tactics and various things and maybe seek to improve it but the goal should be to help Israel get to the point where Hamas is again eradicated. Everything else that works against that is unfortunate at this point, but also not unexpected given the track record of the world working against the Israeli people.
Darren Gobb, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Yemen's Houthis have repeatedly claimed that they've sunk the U.S.'s Dwight D. Eisenhower, but it's still very much afloat in the Red Sea. The commander of the aircraft carrier is combating the misinformation on social media. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the details.
The Houthis claim to have hit or even sunk the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower in the Red Sea. Now, Captain Christopher Chowda Hill is using his social media profile to show his crew remains ready for combat.
I think most of the false claims that have occurred about us, for instance, saying that we've been sunk, I think it's been about 2 or 3 times in the past 6 months we've allegedly been sunk, which we have not been, is almost comical at this point, right?
Hill also wants to show the morale of the nearly 5,000 personnel aboard the Eisenhower remains high. He says the nuclear-powered ship will continue with its traditions, despite Houthi attacks and misinformation.
So we're going to celebrate Taco Tuesdays because it's my absolute favorite day of the week. That will never end. I will show videos of our ship's facility dog because he makes a difference here. People like having him around. He improves moods. So that, if you call that an information warfare campaign, you can.
Captain David Rowe commands the destroyers escorting the Eisenhower. He says his crew works diligently to address the needs of the mission.
Now, using the appropriate effect, weapon system on the appropriate threat to preserve magazine depth, to have more missiles, is a certainly germane tactical question that my captains are constantly reviewing.
For Hill, it's all about his crew.
I came to a revelation at some point in my career that one of the things that all humans require is to be loved and valued, right? So I shouldn't be afraid as a leader to try to love and value everybody, and also to expect other leaders that I'm responsible for to love and value their sailors.
Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Joining me now to discuss the Maryland governor's historic pardons of over 175,000 marijuana convictions is Timothy Allen Simon. He's a national attorney and a retired professor of law at UC Law San Francisco. Timothy, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you here. Now, to begin, what do you make of this move by Maryland's governor to pardon over 175,000 marijuana convictions?
As Governor Craven said, it's a step in the right direction, I believe, to decriminalize misdemeanor crimes involving cannabis. I think the most powerful part of this executive move or order is the expungement of the records of these individuals, many of whom are denied housing, employment, education, and other opportunities as a result of these misdemeanor and what some would say victimless crimes. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I believe it is a move that moves towards civil liberties, which I think society has clearly a vested interest in.
Expanding on that, the governor said, quote, if you look at the past, you see how policies have been intentionally deployed to hold back entire communities. How do these convictions impact people's lives, especially minorities?
Well, 71% of the incarcerated in the state of Maryland are Black men, and that's nowhere near the ratio of the population. I think you'll find that a high percentage of these convictions by our courts are drug-related. And by now not allowing those misdemeanor convictions to be barriers, society will benefit because there are more tax dollars now that will come into the state coffers. When you're looking at any type of incarceration, it's not just the crime and punishment, but it's the cost-benefit analysis. And are we really rehabilitating the population? Are we really allowing our sentencing to clean the slate of those who are looking to reentry society? I think this type of step will probably be followed by other legislators and in other states to ensure that we can put the population back to work to be productive members of society.
The governor is calling the scope of his pardons, quote, the most far-reaching and aggressive executive action among officials nationwide when it comes to the issue of marijuana pardons. Now, what is the criminal justice argument for wiping convictions like these?
I think the criminal justice argument is the fact that this person has done their time. They paid their debt to society. But unfortunately, in our judicial branch of government, that equal of the three branches of government, that forgiveness that oftentimes does not occur. The conviction really provides an albatross or a barrier to those that have already done their time. So I think what this says is that as a society, we are forgiving. And as a forgiving society, we're allowing those who were convicted to have an opportunity to matriculate back into the mainstream economy, back into public service, back into so many areas where we need the brightest and the best to be globally competitive. So I think it has domestic legal implications, economic implications, and even some would say national security benefits by way of getting the best and brightest in many areas, including the armed services, for example. So I think this is a very positive step, and I applaud the governor for doing this.
And expanding on one of your earlier points, Governor Moore also said, quote, we cannot celebrate the benefits of legalization if we do not address the consequences of criminalization. Now, Maryland legalized recreational marijuana for people 21 and older 2 years ago. What is your assessment on the path forward for Maryland and other states when it comes to marijuana laws?
I think they have to walk the talk. In other words, if we're going to decriminalize it, let's make certain that the past criminalization of recreational drug use does not burden our society going forward. Let's really clean the slate. In California, where I live, there's actually a program called Project Clean Slate. It's not designed to necessarily lift the conviction, it's cleaning the record. So that if you're not a part of a violent crime, if you made a bad decision somewhere in life, oftentimes in your youth, that does not burden not just you, but society. And I think the governor recognizes this, and I believe both sides of the aisle, quite frankly. No matter how strong you are in law and order, you have to know that the cost. When Alcatraz, a prison off the coast of San Francisco, was closed, Congress estimated that it would have been cheaper to put an inmate in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel than to keep them at Alcatraz. And I think you'll find this in many of our incarceration policies where the cost has outweighed the benefit. So that's a legal and economic analysis that I think is applicable to all political beliefs, that we are better served by rehabilitation and reentry than we are by conviction and incarceration in non-violent crimes.
Timothy Allen Simon, National Attorney and Professor Emeritus at UCSF Law School. Thank you so much for joining us. President Biden held a star-studded Los Angeles fundraiser over the weekend, raking in over $30 million. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the event.
Look, the Saturday fundraiser featured former President Barack Obama and was moderated by television host Jimmy Kimmel. During the event, Biden zeroed in on the Supreme Court. He argued that the next 4 years could see openings potentially leading to the appointment of more conservative justices if former President Trump is reelected. The president commented that the High Court has never been more out of kilter than it is now, and referred to the Dobbs decision and alleged discussions in its wake.
You had Clarence Thomas talking about the fact that there are going to be other things we should reconsider, including in vitro fertilization, including contraception.
Someone in the crowd interjected, including gay rights, to which Biden responded, "Not on my watch." George Clooney and Julia Roberts opened up the night's program. Barbara Streisand introduced First Lady Jill Biden, while Jason Bateman, Jack Black, Catherine Hahn, and Sheryl Lee Ralph also entertained the crowd. The Biden campaign has been looking to boost his financial war chest. Amid signs Trump is narrowing the money gap, the former president has seen a significant influx in cash come his way since securing the Republican nomination in March. Trump outraised Biden for the first time in April. President Biden talked up his administration's economic policy during the event, saying it is working. He called the economy the strongest in the world. Recent polling has shown that the economy and cost of living continues to be a key issue for voters. A May survey by the New York Times, Siena College, and the Philadelphia Inquirer found that more than 50% of voters in 5 battleground states rated the economy as poor, despite signs of cooling inflation and a halt to interest rate increases. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Former President Trump is looking to boost support in the battleground state of Michigan. The presumptive GOP nominee visited Detroit over the weekend. He announced a list of endorsements he called Black Americans for Trump. Trump was speaking at 180 Church. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has takeaways from voters at the event.
Trump at 180 Church in Detroit Saturday announced a collection of endorsements titled Black Americans for Trump. The list is made up of elected officials, pastors, community leaders, athletes, and entertainers. Ministers told NTD how they felt at the event.
As a Christian, during my lifetime, he's done more for the Christians as well as Christian values than any other president.
The values line up with my values. Family, strong nuclear family, strong personal responsibility, economic independence and freedom on the individual and not the government to depend on for our economic well-being.
I'm an independent, and I want to get a chance to listen to both candidates and see what it is they want to do.
Congressman Byron Donalds moderated the event. Trump focused on inflation, crime, and illegal immigration in his speech. Michigan voters shared what brought them out to the community forum.
I'm here to listen to what Mr. former president has to say, what he's bringing to the table today.
I mean, President Trump was the first Republican I voted for. I voted for a Democrat my entire life.
I stand for what the Republicans believe, and I stand behind President Trump.
He's the only president I know that can stand up and fight like he does for us because he loves America.
And this is a historical moment for a president to actually come to the neighborhood. So I wanted to be able to tell my grandkids I was there on this day.
State Representative Bob Bizot says he was there to support Trump and wants to help him win the election.
Everything that's going on in our country right now, the border, the economy, everything's falling apart.
Trump promised to revitalize Detroit's auto industry if elected. He says he would slap tariffs on vehicles built in Mexico and abroad. The presumptive GOP nominee spoke at a Turning Point Action conference after the community event. The conference aimed to motivate and enlist volunteers for Get Out the Vote in key battleground states. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
CNN has finalized the rules for the first presidential debate of the 2024 election cycle, featuring President Biden and former President Trump. The 90-minute debate is set for June 27th in Atlanta. It will have no studio audience and 2 commercial breaks. Candidates cannot use pre-written notes, but can take notes with pen and paper. Podium positions will be decided by a coin flip, and Jake Tapper and Dana Bash will moderate. There will be muted microphones except when the candidates are recognized to speak. To qualify, candidates must have at least 15% in 4 national polls and appear on enough state ballots to potentially reach 270 electoral votes. CNN says it's not impossible for independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to meet these conditions. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Tesla is suing a former supplier, and the IRS is closing a tax loophole for businesses. Here's NTD's Dawn Ma with today's Business Matters.
Tesla has sued its former supplier Matthews International in a California federal court. This is for allegedly stealing trade secrets related to Tesla's battery manufacturing process. The lawsuit says that Matthews owes damages that Tesla conservatively estimates will be exceeding $1 billion, and that is for misusing company trade secrets related to dry electrode battery manufacturing technology. And the lawsuit is saying that Matthews shared Tesla's innovations with unnamed competitors by selling machines and other technologies embodying Tesla's trade secrets. It also said Matthews claimed Tesla's inventions as its own in patent filings that have revealed confidential Tesla information. Tesla asked the court to block Matthews from misusing its trade secrets and hand over its patent applications in addition to requesting monetary damages. And the Internal Revenue Service announced Monday that it is closing a major tax loophole that could raise $50 billion over a decade. So the loophole is called basis shifting transactions. In them, complex business partners move money from one property to another to maximize tax deductions and minimize their tax liability. The IRS will be now on the lookout for these kinds of transactions that have no substantial business purpose other than to reap a tax benefit.
The White House effort to expand Title IX is temporarily blocked in 6 more states. A federal judge today granted the preliminary injunction across Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. The change to Title IX is scheduled to take effect in August. The policy changes discrimination protections to include gender identity. It also expands the definition of sexual harassment in education. Under the law, an employer could be held liable for not letting transgender workers use bathrooms in line with their gender identity. Some fear the policy might allow biological male athletes to play on female sports teams. Today's ruling came just days after a separate judge temporarily blocked the policy in Idaho, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Montana. And in more sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, a lot going on today, but let's start with the WNBA as Caitlin Clark's Indiana Fever beat Angel Reese and the Chicago Sky yesterday, but all the talk has really centered on Reese's flagrant fall on Clark. Why do you think that is?
You know, these two have a rivalry that goes back a couple of years now. Anything that happens between them is going to be magnified. Now, in yesterday's game, Reese went up for a layup. Clark went up for a layup. Reese tried to block the shot, but she hit her head instead. You know, it didn't look malicious or anything to me. And both players said so in their post-game interviews. But it was ruled a flagrant foul because it was a hit to the head. I mean, that's just part of player safety. So that has ignited, you know, their rivalry talk again today. Now, Clark in the win, she had one of her best games of the season. 23 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists. Reese did well too, double-double, 11 points, 13 rebounds. Really, both of these players are really having great rookie seasons for their respective teams, and they're drawing quite a lot of attendance. Yesterday's game was a sellout, 17,000.
Looking at baseball news, New York Yankees ace Jarrett Cole is scheduled to make his season debut on Wednesday against Baltimore. How important is it for the Yankees to have him back?
You know, 2 months ago, if you had told me he was going to be out this long, I would have guessed they'd be out of the pennant race by this point. They have the best record in the game instead, and largely because their pitching staff has been so good. You know, Luis Hill has been very good, Nestor Cortez, Marcus Stroman, they've all really had good seasons. Adding Cole in, who won the Cy Young last year, really only figures to make them better. And that pitching success has really allowed him the luxury of, kind of taking his time to come back from this elbow injury, which is very important. Now, when he does come back, he's got his hands full with Baltimore. They have the highest scoring offense in the league. But unfortunately for him, the Yankees are right behind them with the second best one with, Aaron Judge and Juan Soto there. So it should be a good game.
Moving to the NHL Stanley Cup Finals, this series is almost mimicking the NBA Finals as the Edmonton Oilers won Game 4 in blowout fashion after trailing 3-0 in the series. Is there a sense that they've solved Florida's goalie?
Yeah, but I don't think they're going to score 8 goals on him again anytime soon. But judging by their comments, I think they feel like this barrage was really a long time coming. That they had actually played a lot better than a team that was down 3-0. And Florida goalie Sergei Bobrovsky had been able to cover some mistakes the team had made on defense. They just couldn't get the puck past Bobrovsky, but that changed in Game 4, and really the floodgates opened. Even they got their first power play goal of the series. All that said, history is still not behind them. Only 4 teams in the NHL have ever come back from a 3-0 deficit in the playoffs, and only once was that in the finals, and that was like more than 80 years ago. To do it, they'll still have to win 2 of the 3 games left on the road, including a Game 7, which is always difficult. But that series, though, resumes Game 5 tomorrow night in Florida.
Shifting gears to the NBA Finals, tonight we have Game 5 between the Celtics and the Mavericks. Now, this series took quite a turn in Game 4 as Dallas routed Boston. What are you expecting for Game 5? Will their momentum carry over?
I really think that's up to Dallas. Luka Doncic was so much better on defense in Game 4. It kind of invigorated the whole team. And it kind of stunned Boston because he had not been that into defense the first 3 games. He was also kind of preoccupied with the referees. There's also Kyrie Irving. He had another great game at home, but he, of course, struggled in Boston in those first 2 games of the series, largely because he was booed every time he touched the ball. How is he going to handle it in Game 5 here? We'll have to see. There's also the matter of Celtics center Kristaps Porzingis. He missed all last month with an injury. He was great in the first 2 games, missed the last 2 games after re-injuring that same leg. He was listed as questionable. It looks like he is going to play tonight. We'll have to see what he has because he was really fantastic, especially in that first game. I think it's going to be a back and forth game. Ultimately, I think Boston takes them and wins the title tonight, though.
Well, Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
Now, we've heard of inflatable jump houses on the front lawn, but what about gigantic ones that span across a parking lot? NTD's David Lamb checks out the fun at Bounce the City.
Jimenez, tour manager with Bounce the City. Thanks for being here with us. So, walk me through this portion of this obstacle course and tell me what kids could expect, like what we're looking at over here.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so this is actually one of our signature inflatables called the Giant. It's pretty simple, man. You either conquer it or it conquers you. If we stretch it out, it's about 900 feet in length, so it's a very tough obstacle course. You don't just go inside of it, as you can tell around us. There's all kinds of stuff to go over, under, around.
Let's race to the end.
All right,
ready? Okay, go. Ready, set, go.
I incidentally went around the obstacles instead of over, surprising Edgar. He called it beginner's luck.
Edgar, we appreciate you just coming straight from the airport and meeting with us.
Yeah.
So, how many of these playgrounds do you have on tour?
So we actually have 4 different tours going on in the U.S. right now. Actually, one will be in Canada, but we travel all over the country, all over the states.
Talk to me about the cleanliness, or how often do you guys, clean the equipment?
Yeah, so we definitely try to pressure wash. It's really hard to talk and not want to bounce, right? So we actually definitely try and pressure wash all of our inflatables before the beginning of any market, depending on where we're at and how the environment is. Sometimes we even do it after each weekend. Cleanliness is something that we definitely try to strive on, obviously for all the families' experiences, so they can come and enjoy the inflatables as they were meant to be enjoyed. Clean, vibrant, just fun.
And jumping can bring cardiovascular benefits and muscle building.
It's one of these things where you're actually able to some way, somehow get an exercise in without really feeling like it's exercise. I mean, I'm pretty sure you felt it as soon as you stepped in one of these. But the automatic reaction you want to do is just bounce. Yep. So, you know, with bouncing, you start sweating and everything, but you don't really look at it as an exercise. It's more of a fun activity.
Next, we make our way and slide onto another inflatable.
See you on the bottom.
Woo! What's the mission behind this gigantic bounce house? You know, what's the idea behind it?
Literally to put a smile on people's faces, man. That's our mission, to spread, yeah, exactly. You know, to let a lot of people experience what we pretty much do.
The inflatable tour is currently on the West Coast for a few weekends, and next, bouncing to New York in July.
So, reporting in Newark, California, David Lau, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.